borders, maybe the highest it's been in the latest years, and Russia has built up its forces. Tens of thousands of soldiers and military equipment are already at the borders. Although talks are continuing on all sides, but the overall feeling is very fragile.
We follow these developments with a lot of concern in Turkey as well, because there's a lot at stake here. But first of all, let me just state very clearly that we do not want to see any kind of military action, confrontation, or war in Ukraine or between Russia and Ukraine. And we fully support Ukraine's territorial integrity and political sovereignty, as well as the social cohesion of the Ukrainian people. That is, all Ukrainian citizens living, in peace as equal citizens in Ukraine. We do not want to see any kind of new war. We've had enough of them in Syria, in Iraq. I mean, in other parts of the world. So we are telling both sides, both the Ukrainians and the Russians, to use restraint, to refrain from any kind of military engagement. I know there has been a build-up, as Ms. Olga has pointed out over the last couple of months. But let me just turn to the larger question here, which is why things have come to this point now, and what is at stake as far as the Russia-NATO line of communication is concerned, or relations between Russia and the Western alliance in general. I think, of course, in one respect, this is about Ukraine, what may or may not happen in Ukraine along the Ukrainian-Russian border. And of course, we have to take Ukraine's security concerns very seriously. And we do not want to see, as I said, any kind of war, military confrontation or action on the ground by Russia or by any other actor there. But on the other hand, if you look at it from another point of view, this is not simply about Ukraine. This is about the larger geopolitical framework in which the last 30 years of geopolitical realities since the end of the Cold War have taken different forms and shapes. In a sense, there is an attempt, at least by the Russian side, to have some kind of a reckoning with the last 30 years, what happened, what changed in terms of geopolitical parameters, and how Russia feels in all of this. Of course, the Ukrainians also have paid a price for this by losing Crimea, the illegal annexation of Crimea, which we all have denounced and not accepted. But there have been a number of other developments in the Caucasus, in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, in other parts of the world as well. Is that it's really rather counterproductive that this dialogue between Russia and the Western alliance is taking place under the pressure of the Ukrainian issue right now. This should have, of course, started a long time ago. Of course, we know why the dialogue stopped at the NATO-Russia Council. It was because of the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And since then, the Council has not met. I mean, met once or twice in 2016, 17, but very briefly. It did not really produce the kind of deep engagement, comprehensive dialogue that it was designed to continue. So we, I think, have to take this into account and realize that we are all engaged now in this new phase of Russia Western relations. Now, what are the larger geopolitical issues? First of all, I think we all agree that there has been a lack of global equilibrium, geopolitically speaking, over the last 30 years or so. The end of the Cold War was the end of something, but we didn't know whether it was the beginning of a new era, or it was like stopping a war. But then what do you do after you stop the war, after you stop the Cold War? What was instituted in its place has remained a big question, of course, not just for the sake of theoretical interest, but in terms of conducting international politics. It's been a big issue. The global order has kind of swung between one pole, two poles, multipolar system, the US-Russia rivalry, or now China joining the process, and EU trying to find a geopolitical and strategic position for itself. Consider all of these things. We can, I think, safely say that the global order, in whatever shape it has taken, over the last 30 years has not produced the kind of geopolitical equilibrium that will bring a degree of stability, predictability, and transparency to what's happening on a global scale. And of course, we have to speak to the Russians very clearly and openly about Ukraine's territorial integrity, political stability, and maintaining it, why it will be in Russia's interest as well, why a confrontation with NATO, with the Western Alliance, and the rest of the world will not bring them any benefits. So in that regard, I think it is important to underline the significance of refraining from maximalist, expansionist approaches and demands, and try to find some kind of a modus vivendi through genuine dialogue, comprehensive talks, and do it with wisdom and patience. I think if we expect some quick results, as Turkey, we've been talking to both the Russians and the Ukrainians. President Erdogan has been speaking to both President Putin and President Zelensky. In fact, he even invited both of them to come to Turkey if they want to, have a meeting there, sort out their issues and differences, and Turkey remains available for any role that it can play to lower tensions between Russia and Ukraine. And we do this as Turkey as a friendly country to both Russia and Ukraine, but also as a NATO ally. In fact, in the next couple of weeks, President Erdogan will be traveling to Ukraine to hold talks with President Zelensky there, but also we will remain in close contact with the Russians to avoid any kind of military action, whose consequences, of course, will be great and irreversible. So we all have to do whatever we can to avoid that kind of a situation. So let me just stop here with this few remarks and to use the time in an economic way, also an effective way. Thank you for your attention.
I very much hope that the Kremlin will opt for dialogue, but a number of analysts, and I would put myself in that group, are growing increasingly pessimistic that in fact what the Russians intend is to set the stage for military action against Ukraine.
Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan taught us in 1984 that the only way that you can actually deal with the Russians is through a position of strength. NATO, for me, has always been the most important body that we are members of. I've been the British Member of Parliament for 17 years, and I've never had a single complaint about NATO from my 82,000 constituents. Many complaints about the European Union, but not a single complaint about NATO. And I think that we need to reenact in our generation the concept of what Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan taught us, which is strength of purpose through NATO. That is why I have been speaking recently in the House of Commons about the need to take on these Russian aggression and actually have a strength of purpose through NATO.